The temperature is nice and warm in the Boiling Point podcast studio, so come on in, get cozy, and let's enjoy the conversation. We empower leaders through thoughtful discussions to positively impact our world. Our host, Dave Vale, founder and CEO of Vision Coaching Inc., is highlighting how we can thrive in business communities. Our conversations with leaders, entrepreneurs, and inspirational storytellers are shining a spotlight on empowerment. Joining Dave this week is our special guest host, Emily Roger. Let's join the conversation with Dave and Emily.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to the Boiling Point podcast. Dave, how are you today? You just got finished a workout?
Yeah, we were just talking about that. A workout in the sauna, and I'm still experiencing the side effects, we'll say. And we were talking about the sweat factor, and you were saying you actually bring pen and paper into a sauna. And I thought, I can't even imagine how that would work in the case of my son. So that says something. We're polar opposite in the sweat index.
Yeah, our sweat rates are very different. For me, I go into the sauna. I will listen to whatever doctor, whatever person recommends a sauna every day, mostly because I'm cold all the time. But it's a creative space for me. I go in, I bring in a notepad, I bring in an HB #2 pencil, and I brainstorm, and then I warm up. And as soon as I'm warm, it's like, all right, out of there and carry on with the day.
I like getting it at the end of the workout, and my workout. And when I grew up in the Yukon Territory, as you know, and my father built a sauna in our house. So I grew up with the sauna, and he did it to relieve like stress, headaches, and he spent some time in Scandinavia. So, and this is in the 70s, and like I assumed they bought the house with the sauna, and he said no, they built it. So kind of we have a history of taking saunas from a very young age, and then for years I said, oh, I'd love to get a sauna, and then the pandemic hit, and then all these excuses to do stuff in your house, and saw this amazing deal on a sauna, and made the purchase. I had a friend who just said, get over yourself, go get a sauna. You keep talking about it. So shout out to my good friend Wayne Chamberlain.
Yeah, love it. Awesome. Well, and there is so many people are into the cold plunge, which I couldn't. I do not like being cold. The thought of that, oh my gosh. And the amount of people who know me who have said, like, Emily, you would never do a cold plunge, would you? Which I would, but there is nothing about that intrigues me at all. Like, I don't even want to look up the benefits of it because I just don't want to know. I just want to stick only to the sauna methods.
Well, I think you should challenge yourself, honestly.
I think I should.
I
do think I should.
Like in the Nordic Spa, there's a Nordic Spa in New Brunswick, just above Moncton. And that's the best place to experience it because you can jump right into the warm pool after. And man, it is quite the feeling. And we'll have to ask our guest if he's ever done a cold plunge. I'm guessing.
I feel like he will. I feel like he definitely has. And but the thing with those spas and like the Nordic spas versus people who go and do it in the river, it's like, where do you go right after to warm up?
Oh yeah.
As fast as you can get. It's like, no running on the pool deck. No, if I'm just getting out of a cold plunge, I am running into that sauna. So on that note, let's welcome in Matt Jackson, our guest today.
Hey, Emily. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Matt.
Nice to see you both. Yeah, you know what? I have done the polar bear swim one time, and Dave, I'm with you. It's something like highly recommend. It's definitely an experience. And actually here where I live in North Vancouver, we have a creek nearby, Lynn Creek. And there are people who regularly go down there to do the cold plunge throughout the year. Even in the summer months, you get that mountain water coming down, and they do their 5-minute submerge themselves, jump out, and they feel invigorated, and it's a lot of fun.
There's a polar dip, isn't it, in an English Bay or in Kitsilano? Yep. Where is that one in Vancouver? That every New Year's.
Yeah, it's just off Stanley Park in English Bay. I think it's first or second beach they do it at, and I've done it the one time. But I've got 4 young daughters, and the oldest she was I think 1 or 2 when we did, so she doesn't remember. But I'd love to take them down there one year. Maybe we'll have to put that on the holiday plans this year.
Now, Matt, you said polar swim. Can we just clarify, like, did you mean plunge or were you actually swimming?
Well, being in Vancouver, there's no ice to break through, but they do have a pontoon, which some people just like run in up to their knees and run out, but other people like swim out to the pontoon, fully submersed, and come back out. So it's yeah, technically I think it qualifies as a swim.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I think I'm more of a polar dip kind of person.
Yeah, same.
I can't swim the best of times, especially in cold water, I would think.
No kidding.
Yes. So
Emily,
oh, go ahead, Matt.
No, I was just going to say, I was listening to the podcast from last week, and I heard you were having some troubles with your mic, and you used your mic as a prop. And so I thought I would bring my prop mic along with me, just so I felt, included. And I think you said maybe there was even having a prop enhanced the experience for you. So I brought mine.
Love it.
I can tell you have 4 daughters. That's what I'll say now. That looks like a microphone one of my daughters would have for sure. Not that my son wouldn't enjoy it as well, but that's kind of like my youngest especially would just absolutely love that microphone.
Yeah. And this gets a lot of airplay these days. As a family, we watch The Voice, which is we're just coming. I think the finale was yesterday, and so there's been some lip syncing and singing along going on with our crew here.
Nice.
I bet. Love it. So for the listeners and for Dave, because Dave, this is your first time meeting Matt and vice versa. And so I reached out to Matt because I know Matt we both attended Royal Roads University together for executive coaching. His bio and experience is just incredible to even read through, and all around an incredible human being is how I was just describing him to another friend. He is someone who says the most thought-provoking things and is not afraid to express himself, to be vulnerable, to challenge things in a very healthy way, and is someone who him and I have connected with on a lot of different levels, even recently about some of the things we're both doing. And so I thought he needs to come on The Boiling Point. Other people need to hear what he has to say. So with that, Matt, I would love for you to introduce yourself to Dave and to the listeners in whatever it is you want to share.
Wow. Let me just take a moment to soak in that introduction. That was very kind and generous of you. Thank you so much. How to introduce myself? Well, I mentioned already, I'm a father of 4 young girls and husband to Lindsay, and my girls are 10, 7, 5, and 2. So we have a pretty busy household. Originally from Ottawa, as we talked about earlier, but as a young man, had a couple of goals in my life. Actually, I had 3 goals. One was to somehow work on the Olympics or be involved in the Olympics, and I knew it wasn't going to be as an athlete. Number 2 is growing up skiing out east. I was always watching these beautiful ski movies with scenery from BC, and like BC is the place for me. And so that was the other goal. And then the third goal was I wanted to work for foreign affairs. I was one of these kids that before I read the sports section, I read the world news. But as I got into university, I quickly realized working for foreign affairs was not the thing for me. I don't think I could toe the line of the government of the day and give up my own beliefs and so on. So I concentrated on those 2 things. And fortunately for me, out of university, I got started in the Olympics, and I had I guess a 20-year career working on Olympic Games in different countries around the world, starting out in the sports side of things, but eventually leading into what we call operational planning and cross-functional integration, and had amazing opportunities to live in Australia, in Salt Lake City, Torino, Italy, did work in Brazil and Russia, spent a lot of time in Switzerland. So I've worked globally, internationally a lot, which has been really exciting. And eventually the Olympics landed me in Vancouver. As I just mentioned, that was one of my goals to get here. So once I got here, I wasn't leaving. And fortunately for me, well, my friends from the Olympic world like to tease me that it took 5 Olympic Games for me to finally meet my person. And I met my person, Lindsay, in the carpool on the way to work one day. And so that kind of cemented things for me. And so that's how I ended up here. And then after the 2010 games, I wanted to make a transition, but I was, dealing with a common challenge, which is making a career transition, having a long, successful background in one area, one industry, and not really seeing how it could translate to others. And so I started a transition process, and just reflecting on this recently, and I went to coaching 2 years ago with Emily, and I think I did a 10-year transition process to finally land in coaching. And I've been sharing with people recently, I haven't been this excited about work in my career since I was in the thick of my Olympic career. And so while the last 10 years certainly weren't lost, I, again, found my person, started a family, settled down here, still did some really interesting work, but recently have really felt the light come on and the passion come on in terms of my professional life. So yeah, and then other than that, I love getting on the mountain. I don't do it enough, but skiing or otherwise. I used to ride to work every day. I love getting on my bike, and I used to hate getting passed by people on e-bikes, especially going over Lionsgate Bridge. They would just zoom past me. I now own an e-bike, which I carry my girls around, and I love exploring the North Shore here on my e-bike. And I'm really excited about all the new craft breweries showing up here in North Vancouver. So those are the things I do outside of parenting and coaching.
Well, we share two passions. It's craft beer and coaching. So that's cool. We could tell there's so
Excellent.
much right there. Very cool. So I guess, I'm just maybe to kick things off, a question around, what is it about coaching that you're finding so energizing and you're enthusiastic about?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think what it is, what I've realized, so there's a couple of things. When I was younger, coming home from university, I remember my mom saying to me, you'd make a great teacher. Who wants to be a teacher? And in my mind, they didn't pay very well, and I had a very defined view of a teacher. And then as I look back on my career now, I'm like, oh my gosh, one, I've been doing a lot of teaching, but that's maybe more the symptom, but really a big part of who I am is helping other people succeed. And when I look back at my career, everything I ended up doing was actually driven by this kind of inner purpose. And I wasn't even really conscious of it. I just naturally drifted that way and worked that way. And so I feel like now that I'm focused on coaching, it's just such a strong alignment with who I am and the impact I want to have in the world. Mm-hmm. And and I think, for where I am in my life right now, I've really taken a step back. I guess I think my work is not as busy as it once was, but my wife, who had 4 kids in 10 years, has been out of the workforce now. So her career is now taking priority. She's doing really well. And so I think for where I am at my life, my experience and everything, it just fits really well from a practical side, but also fits like a glove in terms of who I am and what I want to do in this world.
I really appreciated your mention of a 10-year transition and how, I see you as someone who is very goal orientated, and obviously, other than working in foreign affairs, you achieved the goals that even as a young age you set out to achieve. And so I'm sure you had this goal of like, okay, what is next? And then it taking this 10-year period to get to even getting into coaching. I'm curious of if you had found that passion for coaching 10 years ago, would you be the same coach as you are today?
I don't think so, Emily. I think I still I feel like just because based on my values and and that need to serve and support others, I think I would have been a good coach. But I think this last 10 years has really I've learned a lot, and it's shaped a lot of who I am. And there's an element of I don't want to characterize the last 10 years as a struggle, but there was an element of struggle in the last 10 years that maybe wasn't present when I was in my Olympic career. That has served me really well and helped me understand myself better. And just kind of coming back to those goals I had as a young, high school student, university student, one of the things I reflected on is those were quite tangible. Move to BC, work on Olympics. And so when I got to the end of Vancouver 2010, I was seeking something similar. I wanted that like really crystal clear thing. And I think what I've realized in these last 10 years, and hopefully maybe less than that, but the goal for me is now less tangible. It's more about who I am, the impact I'm going to have. And it took me a while to figure that out, is that goals can look differently. Sometimes they're really clear. I want to run a marathon. And sometimes they're less tangible. And so I think what I realized is that this stage in my life, my goals are not run a marathon, not a trip to Europe, although I'd love that, but they're more about like, who am I as a father and a husband? How do I show up? What impact can I have on leaders or other individuals to help them be at their best? So that's become, it's just become a different type of goal for me. And it just took me a while to figure that out, because I think because that Olympic and moving to BC and others, there was a pattern there that was really worked for me. And so I was looking to replicate that somehow. And again, in coaching, we see that all the time where people get stuck with what works for them. And it took something for me to start shifting my perspective around that.
Yeah, well, it's almost like, my sense is, I mean, someone once said, I don't know exactly how they put it, but the idea that, like these really, really good books, sometimes it finds you. Like I can remember a book, I can't remember the title of it, but it was by the Dalai Lama. And I was in Hong Kong in an airport, and I was never a guy who just grab see a book and grab it. I'm like 22 or 23. And it just spoke to me, and I grabbed it, and it found me at the right time of my life. And I kind of feel like coaching finds us at the right times as well. And I mean, my own experience, Matt, I remember going through the program, and I kind of found it pretty young in respect to coaching. Like, I find people generally get into coaching a little, later in their lives or whatever, or kind of, after they've been through a lot of work experience, might be a second, third career. So for me, it was pretty young. It was my early 30s. But I remember thinking, my God, you get paid to do this? And this actually works. Like, it was like shocking to me. Like, it felt so right. And I had been trying up till then to probably consult and do all these things that just, some people are very good at. It just wasn't me. So I'm just wondering, is that what you're talking about, where it's just aligns with who you are? And does that make sense, or does that line up?
Well, and 100%. And like, again, going back to those 20 years in the Olympics, like in my world, I was the Olympic guy. Everyone in my family, my friends, and I was my identity. And like, while it wasn't always easy doing that work, there were some really challenging times, but like, there's also times like, I've got a career that people would die for, and I'm doing things like the experiences I've had. I've watched an opening ceremony of the Olympic Games from the roof of the stadium with fireworks going off beside me. I've been in a room with Queen Elizabeth. And so it's like, I had that same feeling at that time, like, I get paid to do these things. This is amazing. And there's a certain element of the last 10 years where, I didn't have that same, like, lightness or joy to it. Those last 10 years really served me. There's a lot of things that I got out of that 10 years, both like, in terms of shaping me, but also tangible things like the income I earned and the position and credibility for working really good organizations, friends and colleagues. But now I'm back to that same place, just the way you described it. Like, I'm doing work now that there's an ease to it because it just feels right. It's one of those things. The other part of it is, in the last 10 years, there was probably more fear for me in my professional life in terms of getting it wrong. Whereas now, where I'm very conscious of my performance, I almost really equate it to skiing, like being at the top of a gnarly double black diamond. Like, I'm definitely checking out the route in front of me. And I know there's some hazards there, but I completely trust myself. And while I may not be a professional skier, and I certainly have a lot to learn, I can do this right now. And I feel the same with my coaching. Like, I have aspirations around who I want to be as a coach, but I'm also super comfortable with who I am right now as a coach.
That is so important in terms of just, that who you're being, right? As you mentioned. Sorry, you just have to say something.
Oh, I'm like, this is why I wanted Matt on the podcast right there. in hearing you speak about your experience and being kind of wrapped up in your identity of being a part of the Olympics, and I relate that to like my kind of time as a elite level cyclist, and that the people saying like, oh my gosh, like this is what you get to do and this is where you travel, and like kind of getting caught up in that identity. And for me, I don't know if you're the same, some pride and ego that goes along with it of like, yeah, I am doing really cool things. Yet what then happens when that passion that maybe was once there and all these things that were fulfilled kind of no longer are met, or that we got so off track that we got too caught up in the pride, the ego, the lifestyle, the getting to do things like meeting the queen and all of this kind of stuff. And I think of how much respect I have for people who are willing to kind of step back and see it a little differently. And then the courage that it takes to then make a different transition in your life, especially in a time in an area where there are so many unknowns. And like you said, you had that 10-year transition. And you speaking about the double black diamond kind of at the top of the hill, looking down, it's, we've spoken before about possibility and probability. And I cannot help but think of those two words in here talk about being at the top of that double black diamond. I would look down and think, I am probably going to break my leg. I would love for you to dive into those two concepts.
I would love to share that. This has been top of mind recently. I've been thinking a lot about it. And I think it was partly through my coach training and the self-reflection work we do there that I started to recognize the difference between possibility and probability thinking. And I got some great examples, but one that stands out for me is when I went to university. So I chose this program at Laurentian University of Sports Admin, and as a business degree in sports admin, and they got 500 applicants every year, and they took 50. And I said, if I get in, I'm going. And so I ended up going to Sudbury and doing this program. And one of the attraction was it had an internship. Now, I was really passionate about, even at that age, about Olympics, and somehow I wanted to get involved. And at that time, Atlanta was the city that was organizing and getting ready to host the games in 96. This was, I want to say 94, 95. And I learned that they had an internship program. And so I decided I was going to have a crack at getting an internship. Man, I'm in Sudbury, Ontario, and Atlanta, Georgia is a long ways away, across a border. And there was, my cohort of 50, maybe there was 10 or 12 of us who were like, yeah, that Olympics, really interesting. And so we started to check it all out. And when I look back, what I noticed is that some of my peers, while they were excited about the prospects of going to Atlanta, they started looking at the probability, like what are the chances a kid from Sudbury at at that time, Laurentian was ranked, 29 out of 30 universities in Canada. What are the chances one of us is going to get an internship at the Atlanta Olympics? And once they started doing that assessment, I noticed they started shifting their attention to things that were more probable. And they ended up getting internships at the Sudbury Wolves, the OHL hockey team. And no judgment, like that's a great internship. And, or working for a Boys and Girls Club, or things more local, or something out of Toronto. Meanwhile, I was also working in other opportunities, but even though I knew this Atlanta thing was a long shot, I kept the flame alive. I was like, whatever I can do. I wrote the letter, I followed up with the letter, I kept up to date on news. And at no point in the process did it ever become probable. In my mind, it was always like, this is like a 5% chance, but I gave myself a 5% chance. And just as I was finishing my final exams, for the year, I get this phone call out of the blue from a woman with this funny Southern accent I'd never heard before, and said, hey, we read your letter. We think you're interesting. We were wondering if you'd like to come down to Atlanta for the summer. And when I look back on that, what I've learned from that is, well, probability is a good thing. Like if you're going to run a marathon or an ultra marathon, Emily, hard work, commitment, do the process, and eventually it's probable you will finish. For me, I've had a lot of that in my life, but some of the greatest things that have happened to me in my life have never become probable. They were just possibilities. And I committed to keeping the possibility alive. They never went from 10% to 50% to 80% probable. They were just possible. And that story of me getting an internship in Atlanta was one of the early example in my life where I can clearly remember having that possibility mindset and not letting probability get in the way.
I love that description, but even how you ended that, Matt, around, you know, like probability, like you're describing it as like getting in the way, meaning that it kind of limits how possible you might think something is if the probability isn't, you know, 100%, you know, and the choices that we make as a result.
Yeah, and kind of fast forward, what I realized more recently in my life is that I had started leaning more into probability mindset. You know, I'm married, I have a mortgage, I have 4 children. And so risk management becomes more prevalent in life. And again, this is through my coach training. You start reflecting on this stuff. You're like, oh my gosh, possibility mindset has been a key, I'd say, strength that's done so many things for me. And over the last 10 years, I've actually put a lot more weight on probability mindset. And exactly what you're saying, Dave, is when I look back at it now, is that was a limiting behavior, is I didn't even give myself a chance for certain things to happen. And so now as I, you know, moving into this coaching world and building my coaching practice, I'm embracing, and Emily's heard me talk about this, it's reconnecting with that possibility mindset, like what's possible for me as a coach, but it's also bringing that sense of adventure. And that's another value of mine that I've always had, and I got away from it a little bit. And so now I'm again, feel very, very connected to like this podcast. This is the first time I'm doing a podcast, and it's an adventure. I can't wait to see what happens here. And I just take that every day. And same thing with the possibilities, like, you know, and for, you know, maybe there's 100 times where I maintain a possibility and only a handful of times does a possibility eventuate, but those handful of times are worth it. Because that's where the big stuff, and whether it's that internship in Atlanta, you know, finding my daughter's missing study in split Croatia, first, like in a foreign city, didn't speak the language, finding my partner in life, like literally ran into her in the carpool. It never went from, you know, it was kind of random. And you can go, and I'm sure you can look through your life and see these things that were never probable, but they happened, but they probably were pretty big moments in your life.
What an awesome thing to bring into coaching, you know, and just and it's interesting, you know, you talk about kids, what you learn from your kids, and actually there's a specific thing I want to ask you, but I was just you're describing the Atlanta experience, and it reminds me of my son. You know, we're watching the playoffs a number of years ago, and it was this ad comes on CBC. It was over and over and over again. You know, are you the smartest kid in Canada? And you know, and he said, well, you know, I'm a smart kid. Maybe I should apply. And I'm like, okay, but the probability is very low that, you know what I mean? Like I was walking him through, like there's going to be, you know, probably thousands of kids. But, you know, you should do it, buddy. But I don't want you to get your hopes up. And I'm like, what am I setting him up for? Right. But thankfully he didn't listen. He goes and gets a phone call. Hey, want an interview? Well, no, it's just an interview, Liam. You know, anyways, he ends up on the show, you know, and you know, well, you know, you get knocked off the first show, and you know, and it's funny because if I think about, you know, when I do it for myself or when I'm doing it for my kids, anyways, he proved me wrong because he made it right through to the final episode and everything, and it was a really rich experience for him and for us as a family, and it was really fun to see him, you know, just walk into possibility, you know, despite me kind of talking about the probability, and it was a really good lesson for me, and as I'm thinking through it, is like, you know, it's me as a father trying to, you know, push him and encourage him, but at the same time not wanting him to be let down, which is in a way, it's okay if these things don't play out, as long as you've tried, right? And I wonder to what degree, you know, we play safe in our lives and we use probability as a way to make maybe I don't know, like make sense of what we're not chasing wholeheartedly. Does that make sense, Matt?
Yeah, I think it does. And well, first of all, what you're saying about parenting really resonates. Like, you know, we're naturally here to protect our children. and we want them to be successful, but we also want to protect them from hurt. And so sometimes that conflicts with the possibility mindset. And so it's one thing to educate our children and help them understand, and it's a really fine line between limiting them versus informing them and helping them be really well equipped. But I just think it's really important that we nurture dreams and aspirations regardless of how probable they feel. Because one, there's value in just the pursuit, and who knows, maybe that crazy thing might just happen. Yeah, and sorry, I lost track of your last comment there, Dave.
I think you touched on about keeping, and how it plays in our own lives, right? Where it makes it, or maybe in my life, it gives me excuse not to chase something that maybe I should be, but I start thinking about the probability, and but there's another piece of that, and is that how do you would you incorporate in your coaching or even parenting for that, in that matter, but the idea that you want to keep stuff that possibility open, and also the hard work that helps things show up, right? So it's not just, oh, this is gonna, and we've all had it happen, because in Atlanta, there was some you were very diligent as well, it sounds like, and supported that happening, right? So there's that, and I can think of times when I've just thought a crazy thought and it actually happens, and I call it pure luck. It's just maybe the universe worked or whatever. But then there's things that happen, and you kept a possibility mindset, but at the same time, you intentionally work towards it, and chipped away. How does that effort and discipline play into the idea of the possibility for you?
Well, I think starting with probabilities, that might be a little bit easier to describe. When there's different types of goals out there, and if you're working, sorry, let me start again. I think it's looking at the type of goal you're going for, and some, again, with commitment and hard work, there's a good chance you'll get there. I use the example of running a marathon, getting a degree, and so on. So I think one is recognizing is the thing I'm pursuing, one of those things, in which case it's the commitment, hard work is going to get you closer and closer. Now, if it's more of a dream and aspiration that feels like really big stretch and maybe needs the universe to intervene to some degree to make it happen, to me, it's it's still, if you don't put any effort into it, the flame extinguishes and your chances go down to zero. And so what your effort is not necessarily going towards moving you forward, it's going towards maintaining the possibility. And so again, I think of the internship example. I had no idea what was happening down in Atlanta, Georgia, and I couldn't control any of that. So I guess there's an element of, in the possibility side, there's a huge element that's outside of my control. And I control one small part of it. And so I put the commitment to that small part that I could control and left the other 90%, and I'll just call it the universe, but to everyone else out there. And fortunately for me, in that case, it worked out. And so, I think either way, effort, there's a degree of effort and commitment, and maybe with the possibility there's an openness, I'm going to put time and effort to something that there's a really good chance won't eventuate, and I'm okay with that. But it also probably informs how much effort I will do to that. And you pursue, I think, those two different types of goals differently. If it's a more of a progressive goal, as I see myself getting closer, I'm willing to put more and more effort into getting there, closing a sale with a client. Okay, we've connected, it's a good fit, they seem interested. Okay, I'm gonna start ramping this up to see if I can turn this into an agreement or a partnership. So I think the first is just recognizing what type of goal we're going after, and then recognizing how your effort and commitment is going to support that goal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I know it does, because I think as soon as I like that metaphor around the flame, and without something has to keep that flame lit, right? And if you extinguish that flame, that the probability associated with something that's the possibility kind of universe, if you will, is really diminished, right? It's it becomes the likelihood of it happening becomes very small. It's an interesting dynamic you're describing.
Yeah. Well, and I think also with these aspirational goals that maybe aren't probable, there's another part of it, just putting it out there in the world. And I think of an example, it's actually for my wife. She works for an organization here in Vancouver called O2E. And every year they come up with not every year, but they have their 5-year plan. And part of that is like these crazy goals they want to achieve. And one of the ones they put up on the wall, I think it was more than 5 years ago, was to be on the Ellen Show. Totally crazy thing. And like, why would this company want to be featured on the Ellen Show? And not only did they get on the Ellen Show, but they got invited back to be one of the final guests. The founder was invited back to be one of the final guests. And so it's one of those things where it's like crazy thing, but part of getting there was just putting it out there, saying it out loud, putting it on the wall. And they have other goals maybe they didn't achieve, but there's actually a high proportion of the ones they did put up on the wall and declare out loud that actually have happened. And at the time they said them, no one knew how they were going to get there. There was no plan, no strategic plan for that. It's just like, wouldn't that be cool? Okay, let's put it on the wall.
When I hear you speak about probability, what keeps kind of coming to my mind is that, like, I'm hearing that probability is just very rooted in fear.
I think it can be. Probability, I think, does serve us. Like, again, in some types of goals, you need us. But I think when we're going after like those big, crazy, hairy goals, yeah, am I going to put effort into something that's not going to happen? Am I going to fail here? And so we start doing this logical part of our brain, starts doing the math.
Yeah.
And I think to what Dave was saying earlier, then it becomes an easy out.
Yeah,
okay,
definitely.
That's really exciting, but you know what? It's not going to happen. It's not worth the effort. I don't see the path forward. And I think that's the other part of it is like, with running a marathon, there's a training plan. You can find one, download it. There's lots of people who will tell you how to go from not being ready to being completely ready to perform in a marathon. But there's some of these goals, like getting an internship in Atlanta when you're at a university in Sudbury, Ontario, there's no playbook for that. And so, and that kind of goes counterintuitive to if you have that logical mindset, is like, okay, like step A, step B, it's definitely chasing those aspirational goals can sometimes be a little bit more organic. You're shifting around and like try this way, try that way. You might try and open a couple of different doors. There's maybe a little more shotgun approach, just until you finally knock open a door that works for you.
Yeah. And when I think of your for your internship and going through that process and speaking about maintaining the possibility, and with maintaining that possibility, you were staying true to who you are. So then ultimately it's like, yeah, if it is supposed to happen, great. And it has happened in a way that is like organic to you. And it's almost like that when it feels so true, when it's so innately in us, it's like it makes it easier to then follow through with that possibility, to keep like maintaining that possibility. And then being able to kind of counteract and kind of change like those limiting beliefs that do come up along the way. And in, not only the probability and the limitations that as leaders we put on ourselves, but how we put them on others. And, for a leader, it's like, gosh, yeah, in what way are you holding people back from possibility, holding yourself back from possibility, your organization, like.
Yeah, I'm so glad you took that conversation there, Emily, because I've seen that in organization as well. And again, as you get more senior leadership roles, there's a bigger element of risk management, especially when there's like, economic downturns or something like that. And we don't always necessarily have the confidence in our younger people or trust in them. And so I think there's a real role in leadership in supporting and nurturing possibility in the people that we're leading, and not and I feel like, just on my own personal experiences, we don't necessarily do that with our younger professionals, the ones out of university or those mid-level professionals. And I actually heard someone today, a few weeks ago, I spoke with a creativity coach, and So I got curious about what that was, and it's teaching professionals how to be creative problem solvers and work. And I'm like, we have to teach that these days? And he's like, yeah, that, actually going back into school, creativity, color between the lines is being pushed out of our young people, whether it's school, university, or early in their professional lives, is they're essentially being told color between the lines. And so they get to a certain place where creativity in their problem solving is required, and they don't have that skill set, which to me is mind boggling. But that's, maybe it's just, I grew up in a different environment, different generation.
It's,
Yeah.
I can't help but think of, calling between the lines and being creative and the importance of in the work, like in terms of getting out there in entrepreneurship, or, especially getting out there and putting out your coaching shingle, is there's not a lot of playbooks, and every playbook's a little different, right? And I found that it's such a wonderful place to be creative. And sometimes you can get away from it, and you can feel it, because at least for me, it feels like a little more of a grind, right? Like I'm actually, it kind of brings back to, like, I'm working off probabilities of closing these deals and this and that, and there's some benefit to that, but it's kind of really nice, like going back to, we're talking about working out and all that kind of stuff earlier. I find those are the times where, where you're kind of free of calling between the lines, and you start thinking of amazing ways that you can get out there and do fun stuff, and just the value of it, and that there's no, there's no actual, sometimes, in this world, clients come to you in the weirdest kind of coolest ways, and it's, you can't connect the dots.
Well, we heard this, and Dave, I'm sure you heard it at some point in your training or in your career, but like, as coaches, being comfortable with the messiness. And that's part of, like, there is no clear plan A, B, C, or anything like that. It's like, there's stuff out there. We don't know how the dots are going to get connected. But, as you're speaking, Dave, you asked me earlier about, like, feeling lit up by, this new career path I'm taking on. And I think another part of it is what you just described, is that entrepreneurial mindset and the ability to be creative and to problem solve and be like, okay, like, I need to find more clients. What are the different ways I can do that? And I definitely, as you said that, I get a lot of energy out of that part of my work right now. And it's a lot of fun. It's funny. It's like, not having enough clients can be really stressful. But on the other hand, like, right now, I feel like, okay, this is interesting problem to solve. What can I do to do this? And what are other people trying? And so I resonate with that a lot. That's for me, a big part of where I'm finding joy and what I'm doing right now is, like, this creativity that is innate in putting out your own shingle.
It's, so I initially, like, for the first probably, so I went to Royal Roads, like, so we all went to Royal Roads, for anyone listening, and they have a great graduate certificate in executive coaching. It's much harder to get through it these years than it was when I went in 2004, I think it was. But for a number of years after, I was invited back to speak to the cohorts that followed, up till maybe, I don't know, 2015 even, I think. So, part of the reason I believe that I was asked to come speak is that, hey, here's this guy in New Brunswick that is actually, eking out a living with the coaching business, right?
Yeah.
And I think, so it was, and what part of what I present was from the book, The Art of Possibility, which I love. Is a fabulous book. And it's the tale of two salespeople, right? It's actually two salesmen, but I'm going to say salespeople, because it doesn't really matter if they're men or women. And it was this idea that they, that they're, in the early, 50s or whatever, were sent off to a country to sell shoes. And one salesperson sends a fax or a telegram, I guess, back, says situation hopeless. They don't wear shoes here. And then the second salesperson gets back, glorious opportunity. No one wears shoes. And I always felt that way with coaching, right? And I remember talking to, when I just got into the, the business, and I'm talking to this guy, and he's I really respect him. And he'd just gone through Royal Roads a couple years before I had, some really early days. And he was like, no one buys coaching in New Brunswick, no one in Atlantic Canada. For whatever reason, it was one of those moments, thankfully, that to me, it was like, what an opportunity. No one wears shoes. Like, this is awesome. Like, okay. So it's like wide open. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I interpreted it. I don't know where that came from because I'd love to say that happens in all areas of my life. It doesn't, but that certainly happened there. And then it was like, well, what's a creative way to get out there and educate people, but not pound them over the head with coaching. And so it's just interesting, some of the things that emerged from that, like a column in the newspaper interviewing leaders. And then, all these things started to emerge, and it was really fun way to get out and get business. And so, I'm bringing it up simply because it's just that wonderful creativity to connect, because I think we're in an industry it's not like, you go and you look off the shelf about, who do I want to work with, Matt or Emily, or I think most of our clients don't even know they, would benefit from a coach, or what coaching is for that matter. Still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
sorry, I went on a rant. I apologize, but
No, love it. It was a good rant. And the creativity and around exercise. And we kind of get this like endorphin cocktail when we are moving, when we are exercising, when we are out in nature, and how that then can spark the creativity. And then, okay, how do we carry that forward and keep that going? And, for myself, I'll have clients who they want to go fly fishing with me. They want to go biking with me. They want to go horseback riding with me because they want to put themselves in an environment where they can think more freely. And Matt, for you, you were the director at Lululemon and led the Sweat Grow Connect movement. And I can't help but think of that in putting these athletes, these influencers in this environment to move, to sweat, to grow. And then ultimately, connection comes from it.
Yeah, no, 100%. And so at Lululemon, I led our global events team, and we did a range of different types of events. But one model we had were these intimate experiences, retreats, where we had bring together a group of influencers that we were trying to connect and build a relationship with. But foundational to Lululemon's culture is personal development and leadership development. And so that was our offering to them. And we landed on this formula. I don't know if it was, in fact, I doubt it was original to Lululemon, but it was around before my time, where what they recognized is like, often we'd go to corporate training workshops, we put everyone in a room, and we do our best to create a safe environment and then hope that people feel comfortable, safe, and vulnerable enough that they can share experiences or learn from what's going on and kind of let their guards down. And generally we do okay at that. But what we saw with these experiences we're doing is that you can go really deep really quickly when there's a shared human experience, often some type of sweat. And so in our case, we often did yoga, but it might be a hard hike, but it could be cutting down trees and chopping logs. But what happens is when people share a challenging physical experience, now they got something in common. They suffered together. And from there, you start seeing people connecting over that shared experience. And once they connect, they build the trust, and then the guards come down. And so we would organize these events. They'd be 3-day retreats, and everyone would come in, like all these shiny, happy people, and like they're influencers, so their image is really important to them. And so they'd all have their, not necessarily they weren't necessarily guarded, but they're, the Instagram or TikTok version of them. And within a day and a half, usually by the first dinner or the morning, you started to see people connect with each other that didn't know each other previously, maybe didn't have that much in common because they had that shared human experience of the sweat, whatever it might look like. And then what happened is we'd start getting into the development sessions, and we called it cracking the nut. All of a sudden, we'd see people really quickly go very deep into their own personal experiences and challenging. And then when that starts happening, other people start feeling it, and people learn from each other, from each other's experiences and observations. And so you just get this really valuable peer-to-peer experience, but it wouldn't have been possible to go that deep, that impactfully, if we hadn't had the sweaty experience up front. And so I've taken away from that is sometimes you don't have the opportunity. You got, 6 hours to do something with a group in a room, and you do your best. But what I get really excited about is when you can really create profound transformational change for people in a fairly quick way by following that formula of, again, shared human experience, make people suffer together in a good way, give them space to connect and share the experience and bond over that experience, and then watch the magic happen, if you have a good facilitator. And so that's really stuck with me and Emily, I look at what you're doing with the young girls in your running groups. It's exactly the same thing. We were doing it at a very high-end, high-touch environment, but it also works taking a bunch of young teenage girls or preteens, take them running, let them share that experience together, and like you can speak to what you see happen after that.
Yeah. And it's, in so many ways, it's the same thing that happens whether I am hosting a fly fishing trip somewhere with clients and 50, 60, 70-year-old men and women, or out doing my On the Rise program with 10 to 12-year-old young boys and girls. It's the same benefits that happen. It's like, I wish that I could record the end of each of those times. And it's like, I get the same message back. And, you talking about that having to kind of sweat, that having to endure, kind of go through those hardships together. And I can't help but think as an organization that those hardships are kind of always happening, whether it's environmental or exercise or what it is, we're constantly faced with these challenges. So there's that level of relatability and, taking that relatability a step deeper to finding that connection of just humanness. And so how can we maintain that relatability and that level of humanness every single day with everyone that we interact with so that we can have that growth, that connection?
Yeah, it's a tough one because, I think there's a lot of loneliness out there. We often, a lot of people, and myself included, feel like whatever it is we're doing or the challenges facing, we're doing it on our own. And so I don't know quite how to answer that, Emily. I think I think there's definitely a shift out there in terms of, certainly in the professional space, creating more human work environments. I also think there's some pushback against that. Starting to emerge as everything is for me, everything is a trend. We push to be more human, and there's bound to be a reaction where people are like, we're being too cuddly and soft and nurturing, and we need to be more action oriented and goals and results oriented. But I think that's a really, really important part of leadership, is to create that culture in that space. And before our call, I was thinking about some of the traits of the most influential leaders I worked with and the people I really respect. And for all of them, there was a humanity and approachability, a vulnerability to them that made them really effective, at least in my eyes, made them really effective leaders. And so, and I guess there's another part of me, and I have zero data to bring this up, but I almost feel like the art of leadership, as much attention as we pay to it, I feel like in an era gone past, leadership was, we didn't have to train people formally for leadership. There was more of an informal mentorship type culture in organizations. And as our society and our business world became more bottom line oriented, the emphasis for leadership was more on results. And now we're at a place where we actually have to train. We need, often bring external people into organizations or have internal training teams to train leaders on the human side of leadership. You got here because you got results, but if you want to lead teams, we now need to help you develop those other skill sets. And so my theory is that we kind of pounded out the human side of nature over the last 60, 80 years, and now it's re-emerging. But instead of coming up organically through mentorship and being passed on from generation to generation, it's now being delivered through training, coaching, more formal ways. And Dave, I'm super interested. You've been in the space a lot longer than I have, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, same.
Oh man, that's a good question. That's a good question. Well, first off, I go, if that is the case, thank God for that, because it gives us all business rates. So
yeah,
I don't have a real problem with it. But I mean, the humanity, at the end, and it's interesting, like when you're talking about coaching, you're often talking about the outcomes, right? When you're selling into corporate, the reality of the experience is much more human, and some people would even say spiritual. And you have to be careful how you use that language. To your point, Matt, about like some of that kind of love language, if you will, or those sorts of things aren't just they seem too soft and cuddly. And the reality is that what does create passion and motivation and inspiration, all these things, is some of those qualities. And I know we got to jump in a moment here, but I was going to just on that. There's a book that I recommend to Emily, and I think you said you devoured it, The $1 Trillion Coach. And it's really, it's about this guy who coached all the big the big tech firms, like everyone from Apple and Google and all these places. And they had, collectively, I'm guessing like $1 trillion market value. And it's like, what he was encouraging is connected to what our conversation is right here, in terms of the, how people connect, the interconnectedness and the humanity of a team, or, how you lead and what to encourage in others, and how we approach things. And that gives me hope, because here's people that would be, evidence-based folks that are actually writing the book, who say, wow, like there is actually a lot of evidence that supports this approach. So it's just nice to see that that's gained more traction. That's my impression.
Yeah. Maybe just one final note, like Emily, you talked about, the experiences you create. And what I've noticed, whether it's coaching or whether it's the run groups or these, high-end retreats, the reason people sign up is, the activity, the location. In our case, they're going to Tulum, for 3 days, paid for someone else, hanging out with cool people. In your case, Emily, it's maybe like getting together with friends to go for a run. That's why they show up. But when they leave, what do they talk about? They talk about the experience and the impact it had on them. And that's what they really value, but that's not what they bought into up front. And I think, as Dave, as you said, as coaching, what we talk about up front, what people want to buy is one thing, but what they're taking away is very often something different and something a little bit deeper inside.
Yeah, 100%. So people are listening to this, and thinking, geez, I'd like to connect with Matt and learn more about how he can support me, or potential of working with him. They love the possibility mindset, as an example. How would they reach you most?
They can reach me at my email. So matt@mattjacksoncoaching.com. I also have a website, which is mattjacksoncoaching.com, or they can find me on LinkedIn. And I appreciate you giving me a shout out, Dave.
Yeah, well, and I love, and for people that are on LinkedIn, please go check out Matt's LinkedIn profile. He's got this great picture that you look at it and you go, I feel like I know that guy. Like, I feel like it's this wonderful picture. And it's just, I meant to bring that up earlier. I was looking on my phone, actually. I was like, what an awesome picture. Very, very, very approachable. So I hope people connect with you. Thanks for the introduction, Emily. I really appreciate you introducing Matt. We could keep this conversation going for a couple hours easily. I know. And I don't know if you watch the time, I'm like, oh my God, it's probably one of the longest podcasts we've done. And I don't even feel like we got so much more to explore, but I just love where we've gone and kind of what Matt shared with us.
Yeah, this was phenomenal, Matt. This was a small glimpse into all of the reasons why I wanted you to be a guest on the podcast. And I think, for a follow-up podcast, we could all do it in the cold plunge in an area that it is like, how vulnerable could we get? And then what happens? Like, I'll be the first to crack, I promise.
I love that idea.
I think we should do it and then talk about it after. Because I just can't imagine what my face would look like once you go in. Because I mean, man, you're just thinking, get out of there as quickly as possible.
I'm going to put out there, I'm going to commit to doing this year's Polar Bear New Year's plunge. And so maybe we can reconnect in the new year and talk about how that experience was for everyone.
Yeah, love it.
Let's do it. Okay, Matt, we'll hold you to it. Not that you need to be held to it, but that's great.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I just want to say thank you. Well, sorry, I was just going to say thank you to both of you. I really enjoyed the conversation today. And Emily, again, thank you for introducing me to Dave. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
We'll keep the conversation going for sure.
Yeah. Dave, takeaways. At the end of every podcast episode, we do a takeaway. You want to go first?
Yes, I go first, Matt, because then it leaves it. I don't have the excuse of saying, "Oh, Emily took my takeaways." It's really just that reminder of possibility, which kind of reminds me of growth mindset and some of the things that just personally, I want to step into that a little more, and I appreciate Matt's perspective, and that would be my biggest takeaway, and encouraging that, and not only myself but people around me and family and that sort of thing.
Love it. Yeah, I think mine is around the, as leaders of how can we feel connected daily in order to be change makers, and in order to hold the possibilities open both for ourselves and for others, and around the, whole sweat, grow, connect concept, and always trying to find ways of how can we have that relatability? How can we already show up in a way that is relatable and in a way that is humanness, so that we don't kind of have to go through those first steps, and that we can kind of get in faster to that level of connectedness. And it's like, I think of Matt, and you mentioning about Matt's LinkedIn profile. And Matt is someone who, when I first met him, I'm like, yep, he is my kind of guy. We are friends, whether he wants to be or not, because he brings himself. He's relatable, he's human. And then there is that connection there. And then that is where powerful relationships and friendships and colleagues and all of this stuff can really unfold and happen. So that is my takeaway from today.
Awesome. One more thing is I'm shocked at the sun in North Vancouver coming through his window, because it was like, that's not right this time of year. There's no way it should be that sunny.
Dave, you must realize by now everything is backwards these days.
Yeah, it's true. Because my memories, North Van this time of year is just socked in, thick cloud cover. So
we actually had 10 centimeters of snow already earlier in December. It was and meanwhile in Ottawa, my mom's still riding her bike.
Wild. Genevieve, you gonna take us out?
Yeah, sure. As a podcast, we're always about connecting and engaging, and so everybody can connect with us directly on the website. So boilingpointpodcast.com is where you'll find all the information about all the different conversations we've had, and you can connect with us on social media through LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And we also post the video versions of these lovely conversations on both YouTube and Facebook, and you can listen to the podcast on any of your favorite podcast channels.
See ya.
See you in the cold plunge.
See you later, guys. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Boiling Point Podcast. Remember to subscribe and rate our podcast on your favorite listening platform. To find out more, head to our website at boilingpointpodcast.com. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. To find out more about Dave Vale's work, head over to visioncoachinginc.com. Thanks for listening, and make sure to check out our next conversation.